This morning I woke before the sun and shuffled to the kitchen, the way I have for years, and poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't really need. I carried it out to the porch and watched the light slowly stretch itself across the yard. It was so quiet I could hear my own breathing, steady and thin, and it came to me with a strange clarity. I am 80 years old. 8 decades of mornings, of beginnings and endings, of doors opening and closing behind me. At this age, silence is no longer an absence of noise. It is a museum of voices. Every creak in this house holds a memory. Every room has a ghost that wears a familiar face. Over the years, I have watched the world grow louder and faster, but my circle has grown smaller and softer. My parents are gone. My siblings have faded into photographs. The friends who once filled my weekends with laughter now exist only in stories I tell myself. Even the one who promised to walk beside me until the very end left earlier than either of us expected. When you outlive the people who shaped you, you start to feel like a bookmark in a book no one is reading anymore. The young rush past with their ambitions and anxieties, and I watch them the way you watch a storm from behind a window, aware of its power, but no longer inside it. People sometimes look at me with sympathy, as if being the last one standing is a punishment. But there is something about reaching 80 that no one explains beforehand. When life strips away your titles, your possessions, and your companions, what remains is not emptiness. It is essence. In my 40s and 50s, I believed I was the sum of what I built. My career defined me. The house I paid for brick by brick felt like proof that I mattered. I defended my reputation as if it were carved in stone. Yet here I am, with hands that tremble slightly when I hold this cup, and I can see how temporary it all was. The house changed owners. The job replaced me within months of my retirement. The awards gathered dust and then disappeared into boxes. What stayed was not the applause but the integrity I practiced when no one was watching. What stayed was the patience I learned after failing, the courage it took to try again. We spend so much of our lives trying to secure things that were never ours to keep. Even the people we love are entrusted to us for only a season. We do not own our spouses, our children, or our friends. We are caretakers of shared moments. When you understand that, grief begins to change its shape. Instead of feeling like something was stolen, it feels like something precious was borrowed. And what remains after the borrowing ends is the love you poured out, the kindness you offered, the laughter you shared. Those things do not decay. When I was younger, I was always waiting for the next milestone. I believed life would finally begin once I reached the summit. After the promotion, after the mortgage was paid, after the children were grown. But standing here at 80, I can tell you life was never at the top of the mountain. It was in the ordinary steps between peaks. It was in the way the sunlight fell across the breakfast table, in the quiet drives home, in the way someone's hand found mine without words. If I had known how fleeting those in-between moments were, I would have paid closer attention. I would have listened more carefully to the birds outside my window. I would have let conversations linger instead of checking the clock point. One of the most difficult lessons of this age is solitude. When the house finally grew quiet, no children running down the hallway, no late-night phone calls from friends, I was left alone with the one person I had been avoiding my whole life, myself. We are taught to fill every hour, to chase distraction, to drown out our own thoughts. But at 80, there are long afternoons where the only sound is your heartbeat. At first, it frightened me. I didn't know if I would like the man I found there. Yet in that stillness, I discovered a surprising strength. I found that beneath the noise and ambition, there was a steady core, a place inside me that did not depend on applause or approval. Old age can be a prison if you have never learned to sit with yourself. But if you have made peace with your own company, it becomes a sanctuary. I have learned to forgive the younger versions of myself, the impatient man at 25, the stubborn one at 50. I understand now that he was doing the best he could with what he knew. What remains is not shame for my mistakes but compassion for the person who made them. Of course, I carry regrets. Anyone who has lived fully does. I regret the chances I hesitated to take. I regret the times pride sealed my lips when love should have spoken. But there is a heavier feeling than regret, and that is remorse. I think of the moments when I chose to be right instead of kind. The arguments I prolonged because my ego demanded victory. Now, as the list of people I can call grows shorter, I see how hollow those victories were. Being right never warmed a lonely room. Kindness would have. If there is someone in your life today, reach for them. Not to win, not to prove a point, but simply to say, I'm grateful for you. Time has a way of closing doors without warning. When that happens, the argument you won will mean nothing, but the love you expressed will echo for years. There is also a quiet beauty in stepping back from the center of things. I once needed to feel essential. I needed to believe the world would falter without my contribution. Now I watch my grandchildren chase their dreams, their energy bright and unstoppable, and I feel no envy, only awe. I see traces of my father in my grandson's smile. I hear my mother's laugh in my granddaughter's voice. I am just one thread woven into a tapestry that began long before me and will continue long after. There is freedom in accepting that your role is to witness rather than to lead. So what remains when the noise fades and the chairs around the table sit empty? Gratitude. A deep, almost overwhelming gratitude that I was given this span of years at all. That I experienced love, even though it ended. That I stood beneath thousands upon thousands of sunrises and watched the sky change color again and again. I am 80 years old, and I no longer fear the coming night. I have learned that darkness is not the enemy. It is simply another room the light passes through. If you are younger and listening to this, do not wait for your hair to turn silver before you look for what truly matters. Pay attention now. Treasure the ordinary mornings. Sit a little longer on the porch. Speak the gentle words while there is still time for them to be heard. Build a friendship with yourself before the house grows quiet. Thank you for spending these moments with me, for sharing this stretch of porch and this cup of cooling coffee. Your listening fills the silence in a way you may never fully understand. And for that, at 80 years old, I am deeply, quietly thankful.